It's been nearly 5 years since the Environmental Protection Agency relisted Upper Ringwood as a Superfund site, after Ford Motor Company contractors dumped huge swaths of paint sludge from their Mahwah plant there decades ago.
Happy that a lot of the material left. Yes, I am, because it made it that much safer. But I mean, it's like, I wished we were a lot farther ahead. But unfortunately, that's just, it's just wishing.
The 500-acre tract, which is home to the Ramapo Mountain Indians, had been a Superfund site in the 1980s, and the EPA has been back 4 times to remove more paint sludge in what remains the most embarrassing episode in the program's history.
We're still talking about some of the same issues, still trying to figure out how much sludge, how much poison Ford dumped up here, and we still haven't gotten some clear answers as to how much waste is still left behind in the mine shafts.
Ford maintains that the dumping was legal and occurred in less than 4 years between 1967 and 1971, and claims the area became a disposal area used by Ringwood Borough and others. Under EPA's direction, contractors for Ford have hauled away nearly 47,000 tons of paint sludge and tainted soil since 2004 alone.
Ford is committed to addressing the paint sludge issues at the site and making sure that's done correctly.
Residents and environmentalists acknowledge the progress, but many are troubled by the slow pace of the cleanup.
It's 5 years later, and it's disappointing because you would think 5 years a lot could be done, and there's really nothing been done here in months. I'll tell you, I bet you 8-9 months I haven't seen anything. Take it out, it's 5 years. There's no excuse. I can't find an excuse for that. It makes no sense at all.
Yet the EPA's Joe Gowers, who has overseen the cleanup project since 2004, says progress has been made.
The fact is there has been progress, and part of the problem with this site, or the issue with this site, is a lot of the material was covered. I mean, you really didn't see it initially. It had been revegetated essentially. Nature had reclaimed the land. You have trees growing, grass growing, but I can assure you that we have removed a lot of material over the last 5 years.
Nearly all 12 sludge removal areas have been cleaned up, including the aptly named Sludge Hill, where children once played in paint tainted with arsenic, lead, chromium, and chemicals in the 1960s.
The residents call this area Sludge Hill, and there was a lot of sludge in this area. Clearly, paint sludge had been disposed of down the hillside. Then over time, of course, the vegetation grew on top of all that material.
But this was one of the major players because we enjoyed coming off the hill on car hoods. Like I said, and everybody played cowboys and Indians except for we was painting our faces with poison.
Cleanup in this area was actually completed back in 2008. The area was seeded, grass was planted on the area to basically control erosion temporarily. So the next step here would be the restoration of the area with appropriate wetlands.
Yet fences still surround these areas, and they remain off limits to the public, including trails that lead to Ringwood State Park. And many in the Upper Ringwood community are growing frustrated.
I'm very, very happy with every truckload, every ton, every cubic yard that left. But I'm more frustrated in how much is really here that hasn't been taken away. So the longer it takes to take it away, the more exposure, even with their fences and whatever, that people are subjected to.
Everybody else, they can go home. They don't have to be here. This is still where we live. And and the contamination is still there.
Gowers admits that there are still 3 major disposal areas that have yet to be addressed.
What we're looking at here is what we call the Peters Mine Pit area. This is one of the areas that we know was utilized by Ford's consultant to dump. This was a large mining pit that was filled with waste. It was actually filled up to ground surface essentially at the time that Ford left this area. However, over time the material has subsided, and what you're seeing is basically a small pond which is now in that area of subsidence. The issue, I guess, is that we do have some low levels of organics, benzene, which are being found in monitoring wells down gradient of this area. So we will be looking at no action, capping, possibly stabilization of the area, or digging it all up and bringing it off-site.
He points to areas of improvement, though, such as the SR3 area at the end of Peters Mine Road.
5 years ago, what this looked like was basically a hillside that was covered with trees, essentially. And of course, that material had to be removed in order to clean up the paint sludge that was buried beneath it. The way it looks now is pretty much how it's going to look. I mean, you can see that the Arcadis, Ford's consultant, is in the process of trying to restore the area to a wetland. I can tell you, the frogs have moved back. I've seen them earlier this year, so it looks like they're on the right road at this point in time.
Yet in other areas the job seems only half done. And the streams which have been cleared of sludge still run bright orange due to the high iron content and are littered with municipal waste and old tires.
The Superfund program is designed to address hazardous contamination, but in cases where we're dealing with just tires thrown on the side, this is more of a local issue that needs to be addressed.
Typically, Superfund sites progress slowly and often stall with battles between the EPA and polluters. Environmentalist Bob Spiegel, who's been an ardent watchdog all along, says Ford has done their best to stall.
They spent 2 years fighting with the EPA, even though we found arsenic in the sludge that was there, even though we tested it, found arsenic, EPA tested it and found arsenic, even Ford tested it. They spent 2 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars on studies, and at the end of the day, they were forced to clean it up. And so while I wish the site was cleaned up, we're hoping that next year we finally start to see the light at the end of the mine shaft, so to speak.
Ford would not comment on camera, but spokesperson John Holt said in an email, Ford has worked cooperatively with the EPA at every step to expedite the cleanup and restoration of the site. In many instances, we have gone above and beyond the requirements.
The results and EPA's results at the last.
One of the more positive developments has been the government's improved relations, with the formation of a community advisory group. The EPA created the CAG to monitor progress and includes members of the community, elected officials, and environmentalists. The group meets monthly with EPA and Ford and other representatives. But the job of rebuilding trust doesn't come easy. In mid-November, the State Department of Environmental Protection began soil testing on 18 residential properties. A process stalled for 5 years because homeowners did not trust the EPA. Even now, only half the eligible households participate.
The U.S. EPA and Ford were having difficulty gaining access to the properties to do the investigation over several years. They were more amenable to having the state do the investigation on their property.
And copper, iron, zirconium.
And the surface soil sampling is mostly directed at lead and arsenic, the primary contaminants that have been found associated with the paint sludge disposal.
So what will become of the site? Will it ever be completed?
If there's nothing done within this next 5 years, there probably won't be no Upper Ringwood. Everybody's not going to be guaranteed 5 years. It's like they're waiting for just to all drop dead, in my opinion, because it's like we are the main characters in this whole thing.
Our goal is clearly to make sure that we address all the contamination related to the site and that this is the last time that we have to come out here and basically clean up the site. Clearly that's in everyone's benefit.
The slow pace of the cleanup has some believing that the final remediation, if ever completed, may take decades, and cost will ultimately determine the outcome.
I think it's going to all fall to be about the financial part of the remediation. You know, the debate can go on for years of, okay, well, we did this study, but we've got to go through this branch, through that one, and then they're going to debate back and forth. It's like a circle. And in the end, it'll probably be the cheapest way out, but we have found out through prior cleanups that the cheapest way is not the right way, because that's why they keep coming back.
The EPA acknowledges cost as a factor, but says that the most important issue is protecting the people and addressing the lingering contamination.
Again, you know, basically it's the way our process works. We want to make sure that we're selecting the best fit alternative for each of the areas at the site.
5 years from now, I think we'll be the same place we are today because of debate. You know, and the debate doesn't save a life, an action does.
This is Thomas E. Franklin for NorthJersey.com.